These song titles are so good. Raining Glass. It's just a bunch of dudes sitting around being like, what's the most screwed up thing we can come up with? Which is like, since Slayer, that has been the thing. Like, all right, we're a metal band. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen? All right, what's the worst impossible thing that could happen? What if glass came down as rain? Like, oh, there you go. That's tough.
that'd be awesome. Yeah, I agree. That would be real fun.
It used to be Raining Blood, right? Raining Blood it's really tame by comparison. If I had to choose between Blood Rain and Glass Rain, I know which one I'd want to be standing in.
Sure.
So does Hans. All I can think about is Die Hard. Shoot the glass. He remembers he's not wearing shoes and has them all.
Oh yeah.
Shoot the glass and rain glass on him.
Oh yeah.
Shoot the
Great
glass.
movie. I watched that this past New Year's Eve. Christmas Eve.
There you go.
By myself. Because nobody else cared to enjoy that piece of Americana with me. Anyway.
It is required Christmas time watching, along with Lethal Weapon.
It's required. Lethal Weapon? That's not a Christmas show, is it? Which one?
I don't know. It is almost.
Lethal Weapon was.
Lethal Weapon. Yeah, Lethal Weapon 1. The first
Australians
gunfight takes place
Christmas?
at a Christmas tree farm.
I guess that's true. It's been a while since I saw the Lethal Weapon franchise.
Yeah,
maybe
I'm
I
not
need
a
to
big
dust
Lethal
that
Weapon
off.
guy. Kind of surprisingly, I think. Maybe.
Classic.
Garrett and I had matching July 4th movies last year.
That's true.
At distance, though, which is
Born on
the
the 4th
only
of
July
July?
4th movie. Wrong.
No.
It's Independence Day. Independence Day is the definitive July 4th movie, and I will hear no opposition to that idea.
Well, with that, let's disturb everybody by kicking off the podcast formally. Welcome back to the Goat Rodeo podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Smith, joined by regular co-hosts Dave Cottle and Simon Kuhn. We all work at a company called Reveal Technology. We're winning, and emphasis on winning. Emphasis on we.
We're winning.
Are winning. And
it's not enough that we win, Garrett. My enemies must lose.
Sure. The lamentations of their women or whatever, the Conan the Barbarian. Yeah.
Add my own personal ethos to the winning spin.
Yeah. I don't feel that maybe like you do.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that
this is a Simon special.
So my motivations, and I think this is the company motivations, are to win for my friends with my friends. Like that's how I feel about it. My enemies don't have to lose. In fact, I'm not even sure that I've got enemies because I killed them all. So
yeah.
Anyway, not true. I don't know why I'm saying these like.
Dave, where do you stand on enemies?
See them driven
Dave,
before
what's
you.
the status of your enemies currently?
See them driven before you. I think it's
See
how that
them
Genghis
driven.
Khan quote starts.
Yeah, totally. I've pulled up this quote, Dave. Conan from Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, I know that quote by heart. What is best in life?
In accent, yeah. What is best in life? To crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. That's how you feel, Dave? The full quote or just selected parts of it?
I want to clarify. I'm pretty sure that that's not an original Conan quote. I'm pretty sure that came from Genghis Khan.
No, that's Conan. Yeah, it's fully Conan.
I don't know. He said it in Arnold accent as a barbarian, and that's all that matters to me.
It's true.
I rescind my last comment. According to historical texts, specifically the Compendium of Chronicles by the Persian historian Rashid al-Din, Genghis Khan was asked a similar question by his generals, and reportedly answered, quote, "The greatest happiness is to vanquish your enemies, to chase them before you, to rob them of their wealth, to see those dear to them bathed in tears, to clasp to your bosom their wives and daughters," close quote. That's hardcore.
I have never agreed with someone more in my entire life.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Not one. That
I feel like
rocks.
back on the Psycho Frame track. I felt like they were channeling a lot of that kind of rage. They were channeling a lot of that, like dwelling in misery and sorrow and violence.
The great irony, though, of this like all types of extreme music is that like the angrier and scarier your metal band is, the skinnier and nerdier the people making it are, which has always been like the great divide, that like the punk rock dudes who play musically unsophisticated stuff are usually scarier street people, and then the metal dudes playing the scariest music you've ever heard are usually just like nerds in their bedrooms writing really complicated spooky music. So the Psycho Frame guys, having seen them live, are not an intimidating set, to say the least, but very spooky music.
I mean, to each their own. Let's progress into the meaty content of the discussion today. I want to start off by talking about the Iran-U.S. deal. Remember last week?
Still a deal? Yeah,
I gave it. Well, I gave it 10 days, so we're at day 7 now.
Are we? I thought it was already done.
Is it over? Like, hostilities already started?
I can say 100%. The U.S. has sunk 2 Iranian boats since the last time we talked.
Oh, well, then I win.
Full stop. The UN is evacuating 11,000 people from the Strait right now. Those things have happened for sure.
Do you win, Garrett? Because that's the drawback of
Garrett definitely won.
Pessimistic.
I feel like I saw the very next day that there was strikes in Lebanon, and I was like, well, there goes the deal. Deal's off. Garrett wins. Not even 24 hours. Garrett wins.
Here's what I'll say about that. First, I'll admit I've been disconnected the last week from world news and events. So, Simon, thank you for cueing me into the idea that I won. But by me winning, the world loses. On a serious note, the world loses when I win, which is too bad. In this case,
it's not enough to win. The others must lose. We're all on the same page.
The whole world must lose, apparently, for me to feel happy and satisfied. Not true. I would still put this in the bucket of like negotiations are going, and I think that something's still going on. I do think that it's telling when Donald Trump himself is distancing himself a little bit from a thing and throws like the vice president in for lead negotiator, and like all the other kind of things to like shift some of the potential fallout of a negative outcome onto others. I'm not saying that's uniquely Trump. Like this is a political leadership kind of tried and true method, but I do think it's quite telling. We'll see.
I mean,
and I think the thing he's trying to avoid, honestly, is probably any notion that the deal struck is the same or worse than the Obama era JCPOA, right? So like I think that's the bar he's trying to clear so that he can convince or maintain the support of his base and not betray the base, in other words. So if it's too much like the Obama deal, or if it's worse than the Obama era deal, his base will rebel. And so he's got to like demonstrate or at least spin things so that it is clearing that bar, which honestly at this point I don't know that he can. That being said, I mean, the Iranian Navy is gone, right? The Iranian Navy's gone. The nuclear program is set back by many months to years.
I specifically want to ask about this Navy thing. Why do we care about the Iranian Navy?
What I think is crazy is that their Navy is gone, but still somehow they're exerting all this influence over the Strait of Hormuz. That's crazy.
The thing I care about, right? It's like, if the Navy, for the sake of destroying the Navy, is the goal, I'm like, all right, I guess. But if the goal is to prevent their ability to affect, this situation in their waters, then we have not done that. They clearly still have the ability to produce effects in the sphere of influence that we're worried about, which is the Strait.
Again, I think that on the topic of what was the intention of this conflict, like what was driving this, I think it's quite obviously the nuclear capability, the ballistic missile program, which was in some ways like a shield for advancements in the nuclear weapons program and an ability to deliver munitions over distance, simultaneously building up a drone air force, right? And sending those things back and or regime change as like a bigger, more complete solution. So were these things affected? I mean, it's probably true that the nuclear program is set way back. It's probably true that the ballistic missile program is severely degraded and doesn't provide the shield that it once did. And nowhere in that list of, potentially intended outcomes was like reduction of the Iranian Navy, right? Like that was not a strategic outcome.
We're trying to cheer on like things that happened to occur.
That's
like,
right.
Hey, you weren't tweeting about Iranian Navy rise up. You're tweeting Iranian people rise up and take your country. That didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen. I mean,
I think brass tacks the ballistic missiles is a good, like, clearly that was a stated thing.
I think that's
But I think it's of more benefit. This is like where I diverge. Is that's of more benefit to Israel, our ally, than is us. The Iranian ballistic missile program in no way was a threat to American domestic interests, and hasn't been for a long time.
No, but domestic interests, no. But we have regional interests. We have bases in the region. We have allies in the region. We have partners in the region. There's an economy in the region that we care a lot about. So, and I don't know. I think we are. The Iranians are, if they're good at nothing else, they are definitely good at the negotiating table, and that's where they beat the world.
Yeah, they're immensely resilient, and we keep underestimating that. And I've seen that's one of the biggest postmortems I've seen, where I feel like we're very quick. I saw an article that just the headline was, now the hard part starts for Iran. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Repressing their own regime to get things back in line, they're the most professional at that. That will be the easiest thing that they've ever done. They will run the same playbook they've been running forever, and it will work great right up until it doesn't. Right? It's like an all or none sort of.
That's what it is. So this is like, how the Syrian kind of like revolution or whatever happened in a scant number of days. Like al-Shara was running some rebellion somewhere way outside Damascus, and all of a sudden he's in Damascus, and all of a sudden Bashar al-Assad is like fleeing to Russia, and and that happened all within a couple of weeks. And it seemed like the repressive authoritarian regime was going to like stick all the way up until the point when it didn't. So I think it's like they're resilient and then all of a sudden, like overnight, boom, something critical happens and things crumble. And I think you just have to be like ready to move into that void immediately after that happens. But I'm not advocating for ground troops. Like I don't want American troops.
We can't anymore.
Iran,
unless we test a constitutional crisis.
So I'm not advocating for that, but what I am saying is that you can't really assure or affect a regime change if all you're going to do is run an air campaign or an electronic warfare campaign or a covert influence campaign.
You also can't.
In many cases,
you also can't expect to limit their control of the Strait, because it's narrow. It's a hallway. Like you don't need a navy to lay mines, or to shoot like land-based air to
It's my least favorite thing about American foreign policy making is the hubris of let's go break the thing that we really wouldn't want anyone to break on us. I'm like, hey, that's not what it would be horrible if the U.S. Navy was destroyed. It is an inconvenience for the Iranian Navy to be destroyed. They had one really good boat. And then lots of little small ones that don't do much. We sank the good one real fast, right? We got it. Nailed it.
I should research this, but did we sell them that boat once upon a time? That would be funny.
Yeah, that would be the worst. I don't even want to look that up.
That would be funny. I mean, at one point, like before the revolution, they were flying American fighter jets, F-4.
Oh, those Tomcats are still there, man.
Totally.
The aviation community is devastated watching the last remaining existing copies of the Tomcats get bombed by Americans as they sat on Iranian runways. Just for historical value of like the Tomcat. But there is one piece of news that happened on this this week. The Senate voted to end the conflict successfully. So the institutional Republican support for this, at least in the Congress, is eroding rapidly. Now, there's a huge question as to whether or not, and Marco Rubio has said this, the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. We don't care what they do, but are they going to test that? Because at this point, if they were to really aggressively ramp up hostilities, it would be against a vote of Congress to stop hostilities.
Yeah,
and that's that I think would really turn this thing sideways domestically for a decent contingent of their base. I mean, there's plenty of folks that want to see regime change in Iran and support this for various reasons, but I think it really tests it when you've had this many Republican senators vote to cut this thing off. It's not getting us anything here.
We shall see.
That's more where I'm concerned now. I agree with you, though. I don't know what the leverage is to strike a deal here at all. All the news I read just refers to it as the deadlock. Someone hopefully brilliant somewhere knows a way to get out of the deadlock.
Well, and meanwhile, not a party to the agreement, Israel could spoil the whole thing. So we'll see.
Israel, Hezbollah, there's so many folks that are not party who could drag this thing back in the open at any moment.
We shall see. Okay,
hold on. Before we move on, Garrett, I'm gonna I'm gonna push my spectacles up
Yeah, hit it.
for Simon here because he's absolutely right. So Simon, the problem that you were describing about the thing that we wouldn't want taken away, we have a term for that, a very specific term for that in military doctrine. A high value target is a target the enemy requires to successfully complete its mission, while a high payoff target is a target that, if successfully attacked, will significantly contribute to friendly mission success.
Strategy versus tactics, fellas. That's not
Dave,
the scale you want your war to be played at. That's something you want your lieutenant colonels and colonels to be doing.
We'll do centers of gravity on next time Doctrine Dave Corner.
Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
let's make this a recurring segment. PME with Dave Cottle. That's what we're gonna call it.
JPMA. This is joint. This is high level stuff.
Oh, you're right. This is joint. Yeah, it's joint. There's a lot of jointness going on here.
Yeah,
and if we bring on a foreign person, we can call it a combined PME. We'll call it a CJ PME. That's what we're going to call it. Okay. Shifting into the venture capital portion of the podcast. The Shield AI investment that we talked about earlier in the year, and I think this was probably in April, maybe in May, we talked about a big strategic financing package that included the acquisition or the intended acquisition of a large player called Echelon. This was announced on the 22nd, $2 billion strategic financing package. They've completed at this point the Echelon technology acquisition, which unlocked the full kind of scope of that strategic financing package. This brings the valuation to just under $13 billion in the post money. It was a Series G led by Advent International and JP Morgan, with preferred equity provided by Blackstone. I mean, it's pretty interesting. That's it's a mega round. It's also indicative of this continued and I think growing wave of forthcoming consolidation. I think we're going to see a lot of these earlier defense technology renaissance era Series A and Series B stage companies that don't make it across the valley. They're going to get snapped up. And that's not just small venture backed projects. I think there's a whole cast of call it legacy in mode services companies or technology companies that have components that are woven deeply into programs of record, which have a lot of sticking and staying power, that are going to get snapped up by some of these bigger, more platform-oriented consolidation outfits. That could include legacy prime contractors, many of whom are kind of pivoting from services into product, a la Booz Allen Hamilton's proclamations. And then the bigger companies that have acquitted themselves as less than innovative and insufficient to the task of innovation for this 21st century era of modern conflict. So we'll see. And, our company is no different. We are on the rise. We're also acquisitive, and we'll continue to report on that as we move forward. So second one, Kraken Technology Group. So Kraken, I believe they haven't fully closed this, but the news kind of leaked out. They're raising $100 million with an approximate $1 billion valuation. So this came to light mid-June this month as the company capitalized on its mine hunting capabilities. So this is autonomous mine hunting vessels, which is obviously like a topic du jour right now with the Strait of Hormuz item, and the potential for strategic, obstruction or disruption of tight maritime corridors and logistics and commercial shipping corridors. So it's pretty interesting. UK based. There are very few of these kind of defense technology unicorns coming out of Europe and the UK. This is one of those. Dave, have we bumped into these guys at all? Kraken Technology? I think we have.
Yeah, we have, and it was really interesting because everybody's looking at the air and how to create attritable mass in the air-to-air robotics fight, and these folks are intensely focused on what they believe is the next $1 trillion problem, which is the undersea sensing effects robotic space. Who controls the attritable mass underwater and along the ocean floor. Will control the big blue water battle space, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting how autonomy is being actively autonomous surface vessels are being fielded. Autonomous ground vehicles are being fielded in combat, probably in a way that we've never ever seen before. Like That was not a thing. It was definitively not a thing when I was downrange a decade and a half ago. And to my knowledge is still not truly fielded at scale within like the US military enterprise. But we're seeing UGVs executing autonomous casualty evacuation from the front lines in Ukraine, as an example. And then last week we talked about the Apache that went down over the Strait of Hormuz, and a Saronic Marauder. I think it was the Marauder class. I could be wrong. I know that we talked about it last week. I'm forgetting which class of vessel, but it was, an autonomous boat that went and picked up the downed pilot and crew, 2 of them, and then moved them back to a different location where they were picked up by a crewed aviation asset. So we're seeing these things happen. And then you've got Kraken out there doing other tasks like mine clearance. And it's a no-brainer. I mean, my brother used to be part of a SOCOM unit called Surface Clearance Team 1, which transitioned into some other name, and I'm forgetting what that name was. But that was all about, getting highly qualified combat divers and explosive ordnance disposal people to go down and, like, using human ingenuity and skills and technology, go and dismantle mines subsurface. That's, in my mind, in the 21st century, that is no longer a human task. And there's also this whole notion of getting like highly trained mammals involved with that, and that's a program that exists in the Navy and in SOCOM. And my brother was a part of that unit. I won't go into too much detail there, but again, there's no reason to have dolphins and sea lions and human beings under the water for many hours dismantling undersea mines, right? That is an autonomous vessel task in my mind.
Yeah, I think the part of their pitch or part of their marketing was I don't know that Kraken intends on winning every opportunity to build unmanned autonomous like sea vehicles. They have some critical components or critical technologies that they intend to stay best in class in. One of them is their approach to sonar, and I'm probably going to butcher this because I didn't really understand it. The limitations of sonar are you can either like search with high signal to noise, so you can be sensitive in your search with sonar, or you can cast a wide net. And somehow they have a synthetic aperture sonar that allows them to do both, which is critical to these. And I think that their like maritime battery game is really strong. So I think that the Saronics and Andurils of the world end up using components of Kraken regardless.
Yeah. I mean, that just makes sense, right? Specialization over time. Like, not everybody's gonna build the next greatest, robotic vehicle, whatever it is, and whatever mode of transport it is. And it will end up seeing specialization in components. So that's very interesting. 2 last ones that I'm tracking, and perhaps I missed a couple, but we've talked about this one before, Helsing. We talked about this a number of months ago, but they're actually closing their $1.2 billion growth round with something like an $18 billion post-money valuation. It's closing this month. I think it was announced a little bit ago, but that was led by General Catalyst, Lightspeed Venture Partners, and Daniel Ek, Spotify founder or co-founder. Interesting, right? Helsing is all about, European defense and AI being, layered into all kinds of stuff, right? Again, a European unicorn, which is very cool to see. I think this could only be we would only be seeing this if the Russia-Ukraine conflict had started. I don't think if it had started, there wouldn't be the same kind of pressure on the Europeans to invest in the way that they have been, even though the United States kind of started that defensive venture trend in the mid-2010s. Earlier than that, if you count Palantir and et cetera, but really this was a dynamic in the U.S. that started 2015, 2016, and only ramped. But the Europeans are kind of catching up.
I don't think it would have happened with the same intensity, but I still think it would have happened just because if you're a European nation, you're going to become increasingly uncomfortable with the fact of the U.S.-owned autonomy stack, of Anduril owning autonomy and Palantir owning data and Starlink owning communications. I think this probably would have come, just not with the same intensity or speed.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of political flashpoints that also informed that, from statements from the current admin to Starlink being turned off during the Ukraine-Russia comment, right? So just the nature of those kind of political signals would have led them down that route as well, right? As soon as you inject some uncertainty into that thought process. It has a habit of growing. But what I think is really interesting, right, is that European unicorn, but American capital still.
Yeah, it's true. One last one, Stark, also called Fellow German Group, but Stark. This is like a FPV kind of kamikaze one-way attack drone company, again in Europe. I believe they're a German company. I could be wrong. Called Fellow German Group, so I'm just thinking it's probably a German company. I don't know how I don't know that, but about 300 million euros in a growth round with a $2.5 billion €2.5 billion post-money valuation. Again, we're seeing some of the major venture players like Peter Thiel and Founders Fund, Sequoia Capital, and a bunch of European defense investing syndicates backing these European unicorns. Ostensibly or on the surface doing work related to preparing NATO and the eastern flank against a potentially continuing Russian aggression. So, do we run into those guys, Dave? Have you bumped into Stark?
Not really. All I know is heavier on the munitions production and mass side than the autonomy side. I think that the software components, if I understand correctly, I think the software components an afterthought, and they're a munitions first sort of company. I have been curious though, like based off the age of the company and its founders and like Marvel, if Stark is intentional.
Yeah, I was going to say, this was the CEO who was in the cave in Afghanistan and had to build a new heart for himself. It was pretty intense.
Which is dumber? A Marvel reference for company name, product name, or I've got three options here. Or things from the Lord of the Rings universe, which, again, I'll put my cards on the table on that one. I think it's well overplayed at this point. Or three Looney Tunes characters. Which of those three? It's the worst, right? It's the
Looney
worst.
Tunes the worst. Far and away.
Far and away.
Lord of the Rings is overplayed, but it was cool when it went for his yeah. And then if well executed. I actually love Marvel stuff because it's just Europeans naming things after American stuff, which I really like.
I'll get down
Iron Man is American as apple pie, and
I like
if you want to name, if you want to name your companies after like our creative triumphs,
+1. Or what about our Looney Tunes characters? That would be good too, right?
Yeah, it just feels silly. It feels wrong.
Yeah, that's good-natured ribbing there, but
there's a clear winner in the dumbest naming strategy. I actually don't know if they named it this, but the Chinese infrastructure, AI spying infrastructure that's named Skynet, that has got to be the dumbest.
Safe bad guy there, Dave. Way to cop out on. Let me be mean to the Chinese state-run industry. Come on, real hot take for you.
Come on,
Chinese state-run surveillance state's bad.
We're gonna
maybe they're just managing expectations. They're like, this is what it is, and it's your fault if you buy it. If you buy into it, it's your fault. I mean,
if we tell everybody, if we name it after the thing that ends the world, and then the world doesn't end, they'll be happy living in the panopticon.
That's right. Okay. It totally. It's about It's happiness is the delta between expectation and reality, right? So if you set the expectation here at world ends, and we actually are just above that at didn't end. So we're all happy, right?
So the bad news is there's also an NSA Skynet, and what was the name of the company that built Skynet? I thought it's Cyberdyne. I thought it was Teledyne. I'm like, there's also Teledyne, but it's not Cyberdyne. Sorry, Teledyne, you're not.
I bet. Don't you think there's got to be a somebody look this up? Producer Ian, somebody look this up. Cyberdyne, is there a company called Cyberdyne? That would be amazing.
There must be somewhere. There's a Japanese one that makes medical devices.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks, gents, for indulging me a little bit in the venture scene. The last item to transition us out of this is that defense technology venture activity is so far ahead of pace, 26 versus 25, and 2026 versus 2025. It is more than twice the rate of venture capital deployment into the defense technology sector. It's, depending on which report you look at, something between $12 and $14 billion has been invested thus far in the year. And that's already more than was invested into the defense technology sector in 2025. And we're only mid-year. So well ahead of that spend line, which is why I mean, it's just proof points that what I've been saying for a while is right. This is frothy, and it continues to heat up, and the world is not safe, and we've got to rally the private sector. So that's where I am. That's the state of the industry, and I wish those 4 companies we talked about well. And let's shift. Dave, I think you've got lined up a couple of topics related to key personnel in the Army's kind of thought leader landscape moving on. So why don't you take the mic?
One of the Army's most respected combat leaders, hands down, General Chris Donahue, appears to be looks like he's being forced into early retirement after about a year and a half commanding Army Europe and Africa. So there's been a broader reduction in like senior general officer billets, but I think that the entire community or mine is at least sort of asking why a potential future Army chief of staff
Totally.
is leaving so early. This for the uninitiated. He's known for leading Delta Force, fighting the unit in against ISIS, commanding during the Kabul evacuation, and driving support for Ukraine. And I could make guesses or assumptions why he's being forced out, but there's a significant portion of the leadership in the Army that's not thrilled.
What is the rumor mill saying, Dave? Like, what are people actually saying? And we're not committing ourselves to anything here.
I mean, I think that like everybody says the same, which is you probably have to be one of 10 people to know the real reason. But I think that the assumptions are the support for Ukraine. When the administration's position is make Europe ante up. As opposed to the U.S., back down U.S.'s involvement, and also just the optics of him being involved in the Afghan drawdown.
It is interesting. I mean, like, so there's this Secretary Hegseth drive. I call it program. I don't know what to call it. It seems pretty like formal at this point, and it's obviously a pattern. But I mean, something like 24 high-profile senior flag and general officers have been forced retired or dismissed or whatever, and civilians, right? This includes Secretary of the Navy John Phelan and others. But I mean, Army Chief of Staff Randy George was one of these guys, right? Like, it's interesting. Could it be that the administration has a pretty negative take on the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Is it possible that Chris Donahue, as at the helm of the 82nd Airborne and, first in, first last out, the senior most American commander on the ground during what is probably widely recognized as a pretty disastrous withdrawal. I mean, is some of that stink being attached to him, and now it's being kind of excised or scapegoated so the administration can talk about taking material steps to correct some of those wrongs? I don't know. I'm stretching here because I know Chris Donahue. I've met him a number of times, and I have a high degree of respect for him. That being said, it's an intensively political atmosphere in the GOFO ranks.
Absolutely. I think that that's an option. At minimum, it didn't help. I assume it's probably mostly to do over disagreements on strategy in Europe.
It's got to be Europe.
It's got to be Europe.
Has to be Europe.
There's like a general tide of, call it, down scaling for the United States and Europe, or at least deprioritizing or something, and kind of trying to get the Europeans to take more of a lead role there for their own defense and all that stuff. But if Chris Donahue is like a valuable leader, which I got to think that most people recognize that he's uniquely talented. I mean, don't you just reassign him rather than firing him over Europe and strategy? Or maybe there's
nowhere for him to go. So let's be clear about like where he is in his tenure. He should have been Chief of Staff of the Army already, and it is the prerogative of the admin to decide for whatever reasons who they want the Chief of Staff of the Army to become. But when he got passed over and Leneve became Chief of Staff of the Army, Donahue went into his final assignment, which was Europe and Africa. He could maybe do NATO after that, but there's no like further within the U.S. chain for him to move up. Like that's not how that system is built. So I think, and I have it on relatively good information within like the political circles of D.C., that the Afghan withdrawal hung over him like a pall, fairly or unfairly, and contributed to his not getting Chief of Staff of the Army. And then he is fairly well known for not mincing words or suffering fools, and they are withdrawing thousands of soldiers from Europe. And I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that guaranteed members of Congress and other senior leaders went and asked Chris Donahue what he thought. And I bet you he said some things to someone somewhere that were not in line with what the admin wanted to hear.
Sure. I mean, this is
all of this
probably,
is like, this is normal. All of this is like very in line. Mattis was resigned for similar reasons under Obama. Like, that's all normal. The problem here,
Mattis was Trump one.
No, Mattis was resigned under Obama. So when Mattis was a general and he was removed from the command of CENTCOM, he was asked to resign by Obama because he disagreed with the admin, right? Like, as SecDef is an entirely different ballgame, but as like a general,
that's what I was referring to. I think we're both right.
When I'm speaking about Mattis, I'm referring to his time as a general and like how politics play appropriately at this 3 and 4 star level. It's everyone's well within their bounds here. Where I think the hypocrisy is crazy here is the idea that like we're going to reform the general officer corps to be lethality focused and be real combat leaders. And like that huge swing and a miss to have Donahue go down that. Like, you have now,
he's probably the combat leader.
He is the combat. Like, you have effectively injected politics in a serious way into a campaign that you have proclaimed as, this is the only thing we care about. This trumps all other things. It doesn't trump all other things. It's business as usual. You're gonna, and it's your prerogative to have the generals you want and to execute the policies that you decide. You have a mandate from the people. Like, all that is normal, but you can't wrap yourself in like the CIB flag and sideline Chris Donahue. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, maybe we can cap this one off with apparently this is policy. You've got to be in a general officer grade for at least 3 years in the grade to retire with that grade on your shoulder.
Ooh,
and apparently
that's brutal.
He's been a 4-star for only 18, 20 months or something. And so apparently there's a constituency lobbying the president to form or issue some kind of presidential waiver to allow him to retire with all 4 stars. I'll just say this, dude, I don't care.
He'll be okay.
He's not going to have
4 stars. Like, does he need an extra 10? Like, yeah, I'm not. It feels like a kick in the ass on the way out the door, but like financially and like career wise, Chris Donahue's going to be just fine. In fact, Chris, if you're looking for a job, give us a call. Not a problem. We can help you solve this. Too easy.
That is right. That's right. That's exactly right. We'll put 4 stars on your onboarding packet if you need.
Whatever
4
you want, buddy. We got it.
Packet. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move from that into next topic. Anduril and the Army's Next Generation Command and Control program. Dave,
your favorite topic. Yeah, we've talked about this. This is the 3rd time we've talked about this now. If you all recall, we've talked about before, Anduril already won, an major NGC2 contract last year, which was largely just the contracting vehicle. Then they won a prototyping contract to prove that their architecture worked. This week, the Army selected Anduril as the common data layer baseline for NGC2, which is probably the most significant of the 3. So the Army has selected the foundation that it plans to build NGC2 around. They become the operating system that everyone else has to plug into.
Yeah. I mean, this was at some level one of the manifestations of the Anduril dream, right? This was the vision they were casting. It was fundamental architecture level, substrate level technology layers for the next generation of the joint force, but specifically the Army in this context. NGC2 is one of the kind of backbone architectures that will run all of Army combat operations and would plug cleanly into whatever JADC2 or CJADC2 becomes, which is also a bigger priority strategic target for Anduril, right? So like, this is all, in my mind, manifesting the vision, and I congratulate the Anduril team. That's awesome. Producer Ian can scrub this or bleep it out if necessary, but I don't know how public it is, but our company partners with Anduril on the NGC2 set of programs, and we're excited to be in the trenches with them. And help the Army, migrate into a better footing for future conflict.
I think.
Okay.
I mean, unless Simon has anything new. I mean, we've talked about this 3 times now. I don't know that there's much more to say on the topic. Simon?
Yeah. There's a sub conversation that happens here as that the House Appropriations bill is going to get voted on today. We're talking Wednesday, June 24th. So House Appropriations Committee is going to vote on their bill today, which has some fairly significant shifts to the next Gen C2 funding lines from what the president's budget requested. We're talking $88 million removed from one of the software lines. And I think there's another big hit to the procurement side of that funding as well. So obviously the news story is still that like Anduril is the big winner out of the IV Sting, 4th ID. However, the Lockheed team's not going away. I don't really understand what the Army strategy is there, but there's still going to continue to be a purely GPR, government purpose rights version of like a software baseline that's being prototyped with 25th ID. That's going to continue, and there is still an argument happening about how much funding does this all get. It's not going to go away. There's still like almost $1 billion in the bill for next Gen C2. But there's some pretty heavy swings as Congress and the DoD argue about how much money this actually needs to be.
Well, it's a big one. And Anduril's not alone. Palantir's in there with their Foundry product, and the company Raft is in there for Data Federation and a bunch of other stuff. And this is, again, this is a milestone event where a non-traditional, in quotes, right? Anduril's less than 10 years old, really ambitious. They have now positioned themselves as the cornerstone of the next generation of Army tactical software capability in NGC2. So, and they're priming the contract, and there are going to be a lot of different vendors in there. This is a big deal. And it's definitely a bigger deal than like a kind of a quasi vapor product announcement. This is the real deal.
For sure.
Pretty awesome. Yeah.
Got one more. It's been a big news week. Defense Production Act. And I'm going to need Simon's help here. He's already laughing.
Can't wait. We'll just find out where we're going with DPA. I'm pumped. Now we're talking.
So, Simon, from my ignorant perspective, like I've always thought about the Defense Production Act as basically like, wartime law where Uncle Sam can force companies to make missiles or whatever. You have to build this before you service your commercial customers. But I don't think that's what's happening here. It looks like the Pentagon is using it to bring competitors together so they can legally share information or get around collusion or antitrust laws to reduce production bottlenecks so we can rearm the force, principally with like missiles. Is that correct? Is that how we're employing
I think you have a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Defense Production Act is.
Send it.
A wartime forcing function does not get $500 million every year, which is what the DPA always gets. It gets hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So I think people don't really look at DPA because they're not really thinking about it, but DPA is maybe not well funded for what it wants to do, which is, bulwark, like, really improve the industrial base to be able to produce. But DPA has like a whole portion of it's called Title III investments, and there's a whole infrastructure of staff that just exists to kick out millions and millions of dollars of DPA money to support the industrial base. And under the Trump admin, you are seeing much more creative and aggressive deployment of that funding than you have seen in many, many years. Part of it's COVID, right? COVID really like inspired more creative usage of this thing when the Biden admin kind of stretched their brain around how can we use DPA to come up with some of these shortfalls for medical equipment and like reclassify stuff. But we are seeing, I mean, hats off to this current admin and how they're using DPA, particularly when you look at things like munitions and critical minerals. And you can look at the House bill just came out. The House bill has a report associated with this is the funding bill again. And this is all public documents now, but you can see where they're lining out black powder stockpiles and like recycling of metals, metallurgical technologies. Like there is really important money flowing out of DPA to make sure that those critical technologies are getting investments. There is a whole other side to DPA that is what you described and is the more famous version up until this point.
Appreciate the education. The most recent the most recent news, it seems like one of the ways that they're using this tool, or potentially even this money, is the Lockheed's RTXs of the world, getting them in the room and going, "Hey guys, we need to rearm after the last handful of sets of volleys. How can the three of you or the five of you work together and get all of my critical munitions rearmed as fast as possible?" Is that what's happening, or do I have? And you can break some rules that you wouldn't normally be able to break to do that, and we'll incentivize you to work
that's
together.
hard to separate hype from what's actually happening. I also don't think a lot of that is necessarily happening in DPA. Um, DPA is most of the time trying to get money and investment into things that cannot be sustained by just buying capabilities. So the traditional way to get Lockheed and X, Y, and Z to, dump more money into munitions is just to procure munitions, of which there is a ton of that in this year's budget request and in the funding bills that you're starting to see come out of Congress. Like, that's all there. The DPA is like, we need processing for black powder, because even if I tell Lockheed I need you to buy X number of things, there's not enough black powder production facilities to supply you when you do that, and you're not going to build them because you're not that. That's a mid-tier supplier thing. So like a little bit different, but there's also just like a lot happening that we can't see. The admin is spending money in a way that is like less transparent to Congress in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of arguments about this, about making pots of money more fungible for the executive branch so they can spend faster and get after innovation problems, which Congress doesn't like, because it becomes harder for us to have conversations like this, which is to say, where are you actually spending it? What does it actually look like? Lots of talk about things like Deal Team 6 and big loan programs and the government taking equity in private businesses, but there's not a lot of like oversight mechanisms built in to show us what they're actually doing a lot of the time, unless they, put out a news report or they do a press release to tell us.
I'm going to use that as a pivot point for maybe a final quick hit topic. But Simon, we're talking about Congress and legislation, etc. Let's check in on latest Hill happenings with defense approps authorizations going into the midterms, looking toward end of year, and all of that. What's the status?
So it's pretty interesting right now. Lots of balls in the air, and I think very few of which are going to land before the midterms. The Senate is signaling that it's going to put their national defense bill on the floor, the NDAA, before they go into August recess, which basically means they can't do anything else. Like, that's the end of the Senate agenda, because Mitch McConnell is sick. So they have punted all of the appropriations votes, and there's 2 weeks of recess before July 4th for the Senate. And so they'll basically come back after the July 4th recess, roll right into the NDAA to get that on the floor, and that'll burn 2 weeks, and then you'll be done. So you basically come back after August, and you have 1 month and 12 appropriations bills that haven't been touched. So we can safely say there will be no appropriating before the midterm, or before the fiscal year, but also very unlikely before the midterms, because all of October is also recess, so folks can go campaign. So if you're watching at home, you're almost guaranteed to have CRs to get us past the midterms, which I don't think many people expected anything other than that.
I mean, that sounds a bit like what we've experienced for 5 to 10 years.
It's very much the norm. And if there was going to be a year to fix the CR problem, it was not going to be a midterm year. It's just not.
Right.
The incentives are bad. The House is a little bit more complicated, and it's interesting to see what's happening. I talked a little bit earlier about how they're going to vote in committee on the defense appropriations bill for the House. So the House will probably get all of its appropriations bills written before the fiscal year ends, definitely before the midterms. But whether or not they're able to pass them through the House, I think, is a much bigger question, particularly because what they really want to do is, well, at least what the leadership in the House would like to do, is turn to Reconciliation 3.0. We have a really big looming DoD budget crisis. And all that is to say, the admin wants 1.5 trillion. The funding bills that exist in the House and the Senate are both going to be at 1.1-ish trillion. And then the admin would like $350 billion to come from reconciliation. That is not the current reconciliation bill that just went down. That is a, as of yet, unwritten third reconciliation bill. On top of this, they have to pay for the Iran war, which still has not been done. The estimates for the Iran war fluctuate somewhere between 35 and 50 or 60 billion, depending on who you look at. The traditional method to solve something like that is a supplemental, which requires the White House asking Congress for a supplemental appropriation, which they have not done. So the clock has not started on that. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen. I mean, that's a political loser asking for an extra $60 billion and admitting like that the war was very costly. So I think that if they do a supplemental, it either has to get attached to reconciliation, which then jeopardizes it entirely if the reconciliation is subject to political wins. I think that whole $350 billion and then the additional 30 to 40 needed for Iran are in jeopardy, like true jeopardy of not happening at all. And if the Iran supplemental doesn't happen, DoD is going to have to cannibalize some of the money it's already got in order to solve those problems.
Could it be that I buy your line about it being a political loser to request that supplemental without like meaningful positive outcomes from the Iran conflict and the reasons that you mentioned, but could it be that request still comes if there is some way for the administration to spin a positive story or to manifest something actual, like practically positive out of the Iran conflict?
I don't think so. And the main reason is because you're talking about two different types of politics, right? If it's a supplemental and then Donald Trump goes and defends it, different conversation from it's a supplemental and then you have to go defend it in Lubbock, Texas to your local constituents without anyone from the admin to back you up. It's a midterms loser. Whole different conversation at like that national president level, but JD Vance is not going to be in every room with all your House members who have affordability crises, and they're going to have to go talk to constituents. They're going to go, you're going to do another 50 billion supplemental for that? I do think like it's a fact of life. This costs money. It needs to be solved in some way. I am sympathetic to the fact that DoD is going to be in a pinch here. But if I'm the admin, I'm going to wait until after the midterms to request that supplemental, or I'm going to sneak it into reconciliation so that it's no like additive political football that my members have to contend with.
I have a sense that, with a truly positive outcome, call it like a demonstrably unadulterated win in Iran, however that could possibly be defined, like all of that shakes out, right? I just don't think that case can be made right now.
Yeah, and I have a hard time imagining a positive outcome that matters to like rank and file domestic voters. It would take a long time for those effects to be felt in like everyday people, and they're feeling gas. Like gas is the thing you feel always, and that's why it always becomes such a hot topic. It was a albatross around Biden's neck. It's like unless you can drop gas prices by $1, I am highly doubtful that any Republican in a House race is going to proactively bring up Iran in any circumstance when they go home to do their own stuff.
On that topic, I think Brent crude prices dropped by 20% or so right after the announcement that a deal had been reached or made or whatever. So it is interesting that the political signaling, whether true or not, right, has true market implications. And the market seems to be hungry for that kind of a shift or an adjustment, right?
I can't pretend to know how gas prices actually turn into real life. I am layman enough to know that I watch this stuff and I go, when does this turn into
oil prices?
No, I mean gas. Oil is a global politics thing. Gas is domestic politics. I want to know how much the gas at the pumps cost. I don't know shit about what the cost of a barrel does to anything. I don't get it.
That's where I am too. I don't know how that trickles all the way down. I do know that I don't know. I don't know much.
That's the pain point. Right?
I was about to say what I knew, and I don't know. Yeah,
I'm just okay. Well, so that's what I think as far as like positive outcomes, right? If it's all a question of like, if you can affect the pocketbooks of everyday Americans, then you can take a victory lap. But anything short of that, and they're going to look at you and be like, "Don't piss on my head. Tell me it's raining. I'm still broke."
Yeah, because it's the government's fault.
Yeah, it will always be the government. Like it's again, it's like attacking the Chinese state-owned industry. What a perfect villain. No one will ever complain about going, this is the government screwing me. Like, you're right. It is. We all agree that it is always.
I'm looking forward to the next UFO files drop on war.gov/aliens or whatever it is. I feel like this is a potentially more benign conspiracy type thing to get into rather than like dwelling on Epstein or the JFK assassination or did we go to the moon, like all that stuff.
I think it would be really fun if they put out like 20 pages of press release on UFOs and the last sentence was like, also we need $40 billion for the war in Iran. That would be the best possible way to do it. If Hegseth gave a whole speech and then like some random no-name person at the end was like, and we need $40 billion for the war in Iran. All right, everybody have a great day.
Please give us we need $40 billion.
Please pay for all the missiles we shot at these people. All right, I gotta go back.
I'll give you an IOU. I'll give you an IOU slip.
Oh, that's an IOU. That's as good as cash. This one's a car. That's a keeper.
There you go. All right. Well, on that topic, thanks guys for indulging me a tiny bit on my latest hobby horse conspiracy theory. I'm very, very interested in it, and I'm unashamed about it. So, until the next UFO files drop, it's been good. Adios.